the once unstoppable alien Empress stood at the edge of her empire, her hands shaking ever so slightly as the weight of her lost throne settled in her chest. She had ruled for centuries, her name spoken with fear and reverence across the galaxy. Alien species of all kinds had bowed before her, offering allegiance to her might, her wisdom, and her unmatched power. But now, all that was gone. The throne she had once sat upon was no longer hers, and the empire she had built lay in ruins. The betrayal had come swiftly, and from those she had trusted the most. Her closest advisors, the ones she had relied upon, had turned against her in a single night. The coup was swift and brutal. The guards that had once protected her now held their weapons against her, their eyes cold and unfeeling. No one had warned her. No one had given her the slightest hint that the very ones who had sworn loyalty to her would betray her in such a manner. The loss of her throne was not just a physical blow, it was a crushing blow to her very identity. She had always been the Empress, the ruler of all, the one who held the power in her grasp. Now, without her throne, she was nothing. The Empress, whose name had struck fear into the hearts of millions, now found herself a mere shadow of what she had once been. With the throne lost and her powers restricted, she was cast into exile. Her former palace, the place where she had once stood in command, was nothing but a cold, lifeless ruin. She had no choice but to leave, her pride too wounded to allow her to remain in the ruins of her empire. With only the barest of belongings, the Empress fled, her thoughts a swirling vortex of rage and confusion. How could this have happened? Who could have betrayed her so thoroughly? Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The Empress wandered the galaxy, unsure of where to go or what to do. She was no longer the ruler of worlds, no longer the one who held the fate of countless lives in her hands. She was simply a lost soul, drifting through the vast expanse of space. Her once mighty ship, which had been a symbol of her power, now felt like a prison. She had no allies, no followers, only the cold, empty void around her. Her mind began to unravel as the loneliness and the silence of space wore her down. The memories of her fallen empire haunted her at every turn. She remembered the days when she had walked the halls of her palace, when every step she took was a reminder of her greatness. Now, she was a fugitive, unwanted and unloved. It was then that the Empress's ship encountered a small, insignificant planet on the edge of the galaxy, a planet filled with human life. Humans, strange, fragile creatures who had once been beneath her notice. She had heard of them, of course. She had seen their kind as nothing more than pests, easily swept aside in the grand scheme of the universe. But now, in her time of desperation, this planet seemed to be her only option. She had no intention of staying long. She would find a way to restore her power, to reclaim her throne, and she would do it on her own. She had no interest in helping these humans or relying on them for anything. They were weak, unimportant in the grand design of the galaxy. But she was wrong. She would soon learn that there was far more to humanity than she had ever realized. The Empress descended upon the planet's surface, her ship landing in the midst of a war-torn, struggling human colony. The planet, it seemed, was in a state of chaos. Fires burned in the distance, and the once thriving colony was now reduced to a collection of makeshift shelters and broken structures. The humans, it seemed, had been fighting among themselves, their civilization on the brink of collapse. As the Empress stepped out of her ship, she could feel the weight of the desolation pressing in around her. The air was thick with the scent of smoke, and the sounds of distant explosions echoed through the air. But amidst all of this destruction, she saw something unexpected. A small group of humans, huddled together, working to rebuild what they had lost. There was no fear in their eyes, no panic. They were not running from the destruction, but facing it head-on. The sight confused the Empress. How could they be so calm in the face of such devastation? In her world, Power was everything. Strength ruled all, and those who lacked it were cast aside without a second thought. But these humans, fragile, weak beings, seemed to possess something she had never expected to find: resilience. The humans took notice of her presence, and while their eyes widened in surprise, they did not cower. Instead, they approached her with caution, yet no fear. One human, a man with dark hair and a simple expression, stepped forward. He was taller than most of his kind, his posture steady and unwavering. His name, as she would later learn, was Caleb. Caleb was not like the others. He did not view her as an invincible alien empress, nor did he fear the power she had once held. Instead, he looked at her with curiosity, his gaze unwavering. "You're not from around here, are you?" he asked, his voice calm but laced with suspicion. The Empress found herself intrigued. There was no awe in his voice, no reverence. He did not see her as a goddess to be worshipped or a tyrant to be feared. He simply saw her as another person. This was a perspective she had never considered. "I am no longer what I once was," she replied softly, her voice trailing off as she looked at the humans around her. They worked with determination, even in the midst of their suffering. It was something the Empress had never experienced herself, this quiet determination, this refusal to give up. Caleb watched her for a long moment, his gaze softening.
"You're welcome here if you need help," he said, his words simple but meaningful. The Empress was taken aback.
These humans, whose lives were so fragile and insignificant in her eyes, were offering her help. They were offering her refuge. A small part of her wanted to reject them, to leave them behind and continue her search for a way to regain her power. But another part of her, a part she had long since buried, felt something stir. Something she had never experienced before: compassion. She had once ruled with an iron fist, demanding obedience and loyalty. She had never considered the strength it took for a species like humans to survive, to thrive, in the face of constant adversity. Yet here they were, offering her something that even her former allies had never given her: kindness. The Empress's pride warred with this newfound feeling. She had no time for weakness. She needed to reclaim her throne, to restore herself to the ruler she had been. But a part of her wondered if this moment of unexpected kindness, might be the first step towards something greater. Caleb extended a hand toward her, his expression sincere. "We may not have much, but we do what we can." For a moment, the Empress stood still, staring at his outstretched hand. She had lived for centuries, had seen countless worlds rise and fall, yet she had never felt the pull of such an offer. She had once ruled the galaxy with an iron grip, but now, on this small, war-torn planet, she felt the faintest inkling of something stronger than any throne she had ever sat upon. Without a word, she accepted Caleb's offer. It was a small step, one that would change everything. The Empress, now an unwilling guest among the humans, stood on the fringes of their makeshift camp, her eyes tracing every movement with the practiced precision of someone accustomed to ruling entire galaxies. She had once been a ruler, feared and respected by countless species. She had once been someone whose presence alone could send entire armies scrambling to avoid her wrath. But here, among these fragile humans, she felt small and uncertain. The sense of control that had once come so easily to her now seemed distant. Caleb, the human who had been first offered her help, had made good on his word. He had shown her the ways of their people, the small but persistent steps they took to survive in a broken world. The humans worked tirelessly, repairing buildings, farming, and creating what little they could out of the remnants of a crumbled civilization. There was no room for pride or titles here. There was only the unyielding need to keep moving forward, to survive, no matter the cost. She had been hesitant at first. How could she, a once mighty empress, lower herself to the level of these people, these simple, fragile beings who had nothing compared to the grandeur of her lost empire? But Caleb had insisted she stay with them, to work with them. Slowly, the Empress had begun to see the strength in their simplicity, the strength in their unity. These people were survivors, and in a way, they were stronger than any empire she had ever known. Days passed, and the Empress began to adapt. She took on small tasks, at first unwillingly, but gradually with more purpose. The humans treated her like one of their own, as if her status as an empress meant nothing. It was a strange sensation for her. No one bowed to her here. No one feared her. Yet, she found herself doing something she had not done in centuries, working side by side with others. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was part of something. She had been alone for so long, drifting through the emptiness of space, that she had forgotten what it felt like to be part of a community, to be needed. Caleb, who had been a quiet but constant presence by her side, watched her change with a silent understanding. He never pressured her, never asked her to explain herself. He simply worked beside her, teaching her what he knew about surviving in a world that was no longer kind to the weak. She could see the respect in his eyes, though it wasn't the kind of respect she was accustomed to. There was no fear or awe, only a quiet admiration for her resilience. One evening, as the sun began to set over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of red and gold, the Empress sat alone on a small ledge overlooking the camp. The day had been long, and she was tired, but there was something comforting about the stillness that surrounded her now. The emptiness she had once felt in her heart had begun to fade, replaced by something new. A sense of purpose, perhaps. Or maybe it was just the quiet strength of these humans rubbing off on her. Caleb approached her, his footsteps light on the dirt. He stood beside her for a moment, silent, before speaking. "You've changed," he said softly, his voice carrying a quiet warmth. The Empress turned to him, studying his face for a moment. He wasn't one to speak in riddles or make unnecessary comments. He simply said what was on his mind, and in a way, she appreciated that.
"I didn't have much choice," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I had to change."
I had nothing left, not even my throne. Caleb nodded, as if understanding more than she had meant to say. "Sometimes it's not the throne that matters," he said quietly. "It's the people you fight for." The words hit her harder than she expected. She had spent so much of her life fighting for power, for control, for something that could never truly satisfy her. But Caleb was right. These humans, they fought for each other, for their families, for their future. It was a strength she had never fully understood until now. "You're a good leader, Caleb," she said, her voice tinged with a quiet admiration. "You've shown me a different way of looking at the world, a way that isn't about power, but about something more."
Caleb met her gaze, his expression serious. "You've got something in you, too."
"Maybe you just need to remember what it is."
The Empress frowned, unsure of what he meant.
She had spent so long focused on regaining her power, on reclaiming the throne that had been taken from her, that she had lost sight of everything else. But here, with Caleb and the humans, she was beginning to see a different kind of strength. It wasn't the strength of an empire or the might of a ruler. It was the strength of perseverance, of survival, of never giving up even when everything seemed lost. Her thoughts were interrupted by the distant sound of an explosion, the ground shaking beneath her feet. Caleb tensed beside her, his eyes immediately scanning the horizon. The humans were always on edge, always ready for an attack. But this was different. The Empress could feel the tension in the air, the kind of tension that only came when real danger was near.
"They found us," Caleb muttered, his voice low but resolute.
He turned to the Empress, his expression hardening. "Stay here. I'll gather the others." The Empress nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. For the first time since her fall from grace, she felt a fire ignite within her. She was no longer a ruler without a throne. She was someone who had something worth protecting. These humans, this small, struggling group, had shown her a side of herself she had long forgotten. And now, someone was threatening that. As Caleb brushed off to assemble the others, the Empress stood and walked to the center of the camp. She could feel the power surging within her, a familiar but distant sensation. Her training, her knowledge, everything she had once been, was still there, buried beneath the layers of her broken past. She might not have the throne, but she had something far more important now. A purpose, a cause. The humans were ready. They had faced adversity before, and they had survived. They would survive again. But this time, they would have something that they had never had before. Her. The Empress closed her eyes, her mind focusing. She could feel the energy of the planet, the wind, the earth beneath her feet. She had always been connected to the power of the universe, but it had been a power she had used to control, to dominate. Now, she felt that power in a different way. This was the power of unity, of standing together with others to face what was coming. The Empress opened her eyes, a new resolve settling over her. She was no longer alone. She was part of something larger than herself, something far more powerful than any throne could offer. And for the first time in a long time, she was ready to fight for it. The air was thick with tension as the Empress stood at the center of the camp, her senses heightened by the imminent threat that approached. The humans around her moved with purpose, their faces set with determination. Caleb had gathered the colony's survivors, and they were preparing to face the new enemy, a group of raiders that had been terrorizing their world. The Empress had seen many battles in her long life, but this felt different. There were no vast armies, no grand strategies. It was just a small group of humans fighting for their homes, their families, and everything they had left. She had fought for power, for control, for her throne. But now, for the first time, she felt something stir inside her, a desire to protect, not to conquer. Caleb approached her, his expression grim but resolute. "We'll need your help," he said, his voice steady despite the fear that lingered in his eyes. "They're more organized than we thought." "We'll fight, but we need to be ready." The Empress nodded, her heart beating faster. Her powers had been severely diminished since her fall from grace, but there was still strength within her. She could still sense the pulse of energy that flowed through the universe, and with it, she could still channel the ancient abilities that had once made her a fearsome ruler. But it was not the same power that she had used to dominate. It was a different kind of strength, one that was rooted in unity, in the bond between these humans. "We'll face them together," she said, her voice calm but filled with a quiet determination.
"I will fight by your side." Caleb's eyes met hers, and for a moment the Empress saw something new in him, a flicker of trust.
He had seen her as an outsider at first, someone lost and broken. But now, after everything they had been through, he saw her as an ally, as someone who was willing to stand with them, not as a ruler, but as a protector. The humans worked quickly, preparing weapons, securing the perimeter, and organizing into groups. The Empress had offered her help, but the humans were used to doing things their way, and she had learned to respect that. She moved among them, watching as they worked together, each person contributing what they could. There was no room for pride, no room for ego, just the sheer will to survive. As night fell, the first signs of the raiders appeared on the horizon, their ships descending through the smoky sky. The Empress could feel their presence long before she saw them, a cold, malevolent energy that cut through the air like a blade. These raiders had no honor, no sense of humanity. They took what they wanted, leaving destruction in their wake. The humans didn't panic. They had been through this before, and they knew what to do. The Empress, standing at the edge of the camp, could see the fear in their eyes, but it was not the kind of fear that would make them flee. It was the fear of knowing what was coming, of understanding the battle that lay ahead, but it was also the fear that drove them to fight, to protect what little they had left. Caleb stood beside her, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon. "We hold the line here," he said quietly, his voice filled with resolve. "We don't give up this time." The Empress nodded. I will not let them take this from you. She felt the power inside her stir once more. It was not the overwhelming force she had once wielded, but it was enough. It was a power that connected her to these people, to their struggle, and to their will to survive. She had spent so long seeking power for the sake of domination, but now, in this moment, she understood that true strength came from the people around her, from the unity they shared. The raiders descended upon the camp, their ships crashing to the ground with a deafening roar. The humans fought back with everything they had: arrows, guns, and makeshift weapons, and the Empress joined them, her own abilities now in full force. She could feel the energy of the planet beneath her, the ancient power of the world, and she channeled it through her body, her hands glowing with a faint, ethereal light. The raiders were fierce, but the humans were relentless. The Empress fought alongside them, her movements fluid and precise, using her powers to disarm the invaders, to throw them back with bursts of energy. She no longer fought for glory, no longer fought to reclaim her throne. She fought for them, for Caleb, for the people she had come to care for. She watched Caleb as he led the charge, his determination unwavering. He moved with purpose, taking down raiders left and right, his leadership inspiring the others to keep fighting. The Empress felt a deep sense of pride swell within her. She had once ruled with fear, but Caleb ruled with respect, with a quiet strength that was impossible to ignore. The battle raged on, the air thick with smoke, and the sounds of clashing metal. The Empress could feel the strain in her body, the exhaustion that threatened to overtake her. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. Not when these humans were giving everything they had to protect their home. She had seen the power of unity before, but never like this. It wasn't the power of an empire or the might of an alien army. It was the strength of people who had nothing left to lose, but who still found the will to fight. The Empress could feel the tides turning. The raiders were beginning to retreat, their forces faltering under the pressure of the humans' resistance. Caleb was at the front, his face bloodied but determined, leading the final push. The Empress felt a surge of energy inside her, a final burst of power that she had not known she still possessed. She unleashed it, sending a wave of energy through the ground that knocked the raiders off their feet. With one final push, the invaders were driven back. The battle was over, and the humans had won. The Empress stood amidst the wreckage, her body battered but unbroken. She had fought for something she had never thought she would fight for. These humans, their home, their survival. Caleb approached her, his face weary but filled with gratitude. "We did it," he said, his voice a mixture of relief and exhaustion. The Empress looked at him, her heart swelling with something she had never felt before. "No," she said softly. "You did it. You showed me what true strength is." Caleb smiled, his eyes filled with something deeper now, a bond that had been forged through the fire of battle. "We did it together." And in that moment, the Empress realized something that had been slowly dawning on her. She had not lost her throne. She had found something stronger, something more. The strength of these humans, of Caleb, had given her something she had never thought possible. A purpose, a cause to fight for, not as a ruler, but as an ally. The night after the battle was filled with the sounds of relief and exhaustion. The fires that had once blazed brightly were now subdued, and the air, though thick with smoke, carried a quiet peace. The humans who had fought so fiercely sat in small groups, tending to the wounded, sharing what little food they had left, and whispering quietly among themselves. The Empress, standing at the edge of the camp, watched them, a sense of wonder creeping into her heart. She had been a ruler once. She had commanded armies, wielded power, and bent worlds to her will. But none of that had ever brought her the kind of peace she now saw in the eyes of the humans. They had fought not for glory, not for empire, but for each other, for their families, their homes, their future. And in that fight, They had proven to her that there was a strength far greater than anything she had ever known. Caleb approached her, his steps slow but sure. His face was marked by the battle, dirt smeared across his forehead, a cut on his cheek, and his clothes torn in places. But despite his exhaustion, his eyes carried a fire that never seemed to fade. "You're not going to let me stand alone, are you?" he asked with a grin that barely concealed the fatigue in his voice. The Empress smiled, the first genuine smile she had offered since her fall from grace. "No," she replied softly. "I don't think I can. Not anymore." They sat together by the remnants of the campfire, the embers still glowing faintly in the night. For a long time, neither of them spoke. There was no need for words. The silence between them was comfortable, shared in the aftermath of everything they had endured. They had both fought side by side, their strengths complementing each other. She had once sought to rule with fear and dominance, but now she had found something far more valuable: partnership, trust, and the unspoken bond between them. Caleb turned his head slightly, his gaze meeting hers. "Do you ever think about going back?" The question caught her off guard. For a moment, she was silent, considering it. Her mind drifted back to her lost empire, the throne that had once been hers. She had spent so long yearning to reclaim what had been taken from her, to restore herself to the heights she had once occupied. But now, after all that had happened, she felt something stirring deep within her, a shift in what she truly desired. "I did," she said finally, her voice low. "I thought about it. A lot. I wanted to take back what was mine, to be the Empress again, to rule."
Caleb nodded, as though expecting that answer. But, she paused, her eyes drifting to the stars above them. "It's not the throne that matters anymore. It's the people."
The ones who fight beside you. The ones who make you stronger. Not through power or fear, but through something deeper. Something that can't be taken from you. Caleb's eyes softened, and he placed a hand gently on hers.
"I think you've found what you're looking for, then. It's not the throne.
It's the fight. The reason behind it." She looked at him, her heart swelling with an unfamiliar feeling. It wasn't something she had ever experienced before. Not in all her years of ruling and conquering. It was a quiet, steady warmth that began to spread within her chest. "Perhaps I have," she said softly. "Perhaps the greatest power is not in ruling, but in standing together with those who fight for something that matters." The night passed peacefully, and when morning came, the Empress stood and looked out over the camp. The humans were already at work, as they always were, repairing, rebuilding, creating something out of nothing. It was as though the battle had never happened. Life here, for them, was a constant cycle of struggle and survival, but it was also a cycle of hope. She had learned so much in the short time she had spent with them. These humans, so fragile in her eyes at first, were the true strength of the galaxy. They endured, no matter the odds, no matter the challenges. They didn't bow to power, and they didn't seek domination. They simply sought to live, to protect, and to rebuild what they had lost. As the Empress watched Caleb move through the camp, speaking with the others offering assistance, she realized that the greatest leaders didn't seek to control. They sought to inspire. They didn't need to rule with fear, because their strength came from within, from the hearts of those they fought beside. She turned to Caleb, her heart filled with a quiet resolve. "What happens now?" she asked. "After everything, where do we go from here?" Caleb smiled, his expression calm and content. "Now we rebuild. We make sure that what we fought for doesn't get taken again. We protect it, together." The Empress felt a surge of emotion rise within her. The power she had once craved, the throne she had once longed for, now seemed so distant. What she had found in this small human colony was far greater. a purpose, a cause worth fighting for. A future where she could stand not as a ruler, but as a protector. For the first time in her life, she didn't need to be an empress. She didn't need to command armies or sit upon a throne. She needed only to stand by these people, these humans who had shown her the meaning of true strength. As she looked at Caleb, she saw not just a partner, but a symbol of everything she had come to believe in. He was not a king, not a ruler, but a man who had fought for his people, for what was right. And that, she realized, was the truest power of all. "Then let's rebuild," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "Together." And so they did. Side by side, the Empress and Caleb helped lead the humans in the rebuilding of their world. They faced new challenges, new enemies. But they also faced them with a strength they had never known before. The Empress had once ruled an empire, but now she found something far greater in the humans, who had shown her the power of unity, of standing together, and of protecting what truly mattered. The Empress no longer sought her throne. She had found something far more meaningful. A purpose, a future, and a family in the humans who had become her greatest allies. The galaxy was vast, and there were still many battles to fight. But with Caleb by her side, and the humans who had fought with her, she knew that they would face whatever came next, not as a ruler and her subjects, but as partners in a cause worth fighting for. Together, they would face the future, stronger than ever before.